Hello, everyone. Yeah, there's not a lot going on. Just take the two of the three busiest days on the Hockey Buzz calendar and put them 3 days apart in the middle of a pandemic when there's, when no one knows how much money is available. And yeah, sure, so it's just like, honestly, there's not enough iced tea this week to get me through this. I was just joking with my son. I'm like, holy hell, what are we doing here? This is crazy. I mean, like, is there a reason? Like, I thought about this. Is there a reason these things had to be so close together? Like, we're not playing until January. Well, like, why are we doing this way? Like, why are we?
Well, remember, they scheduled the beginning of training camp for the middle of November.
That's not going to happen either.
Well, no, I read something, and I can't remember who it was, but it was not like a fly-by-night person who was told. A player tweeted out they were told by their team to plan on middle of November for the training camp. So
when did their team tell them this? Like this was something that was like a month ago.
This was like in the last 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, it was recently. I saw it also.
Yeah. So I mean,
that's interesting, because if that's the case, then we're starting in December. But if we're not starting in December, then
this is all interconnected to. And remember, this whole thing about the 82 game schedule, prorated, all this stuff, and them wanting to avoid going to war with the PA, because if all of a sudden they say it's a 70 game season and they want to prorate salaries, then we're going to have the same cluster F that Major League Baseball had with the Players Association.
And we're going to have that. But the other reality is, like, listen, I mean, you're right about all that. And the other reality is the NHL, there's no way they can play, I was told, more than half a season without fans. So it's like, if they're going to be in that spot where there's,
so maybe they start December 1 without fans.
And I was told that they have to actually be done. NBC tells them they have to be done by the end of June, not July 21st, like we originally thought. So that's another thing that's going on. So that is also, there's more. There's NBC already has stuff for the beginning of July. And
so that even makes it even more imperative that they start in December, even if it is.
I mean, I'm all for them starting in December. I don't want to wait around until January. Nobody does, right? But I think
but it doesn't mean there's not going to be pitfalls built in there,
right? I mean, the reality is you're talking about bubbles if you're doing that. You're talking about bubbles if you start in December. There's no choice about it.
I mean, think of it this way: they start December 1. They're going to play 16 games per month. No All-Star break, no bye week. Probably back-to-back games to cut down on travel, like right. Buffalo and Boston, Saturday and Sunday, back-to-back game to cut down on travel and to cut down on cost. That means ending the season at the end of April and then playing playoffs in May and June, and they end at the end of June. It's a tight schedule, but that's a tight
schedule.
It reminds me, though. I mean, they did when we had the half-year lockout situation, strike or whatever it was.
It was only 48 games.
48 games. We didn't play against any other teams in the other conference, right? We just played in your own conference, which I think is.
And fans got sick of that,
right?
Well, it's interesting you say that, Russ.
They hated it. No, they hated it.
No, I mean, a lot of fans hate it, but the NHL's numbers show that their ratings and ticket sales are always better for conference games. So
when there's
the NHL doesn't feel that. The NHL doesn't think that.
And when there's a full schedule of other games.
Right. The problem is it got to be overkill. You started to get almost weary of playing those guys all the time because there's no variation. And fans also look forward to seeing other teams coming in, rather than just basically facing the same teams over and over and over again. And that's part of the problem with the brackets.
Yeah.
Teams got sick of the bracket. I mean, fans have gotten sick of the bracket right now.
Yeah. This year was a little more interesting than that, which was good. All right. Let's, all right. We will get into that. Some trade rumors of the Flyers and line and all that stuff. I've been talking.
Let's cover the stuff that happened, and then we'll get into the rumors, because let's jump right in if we could. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Go.
Here we go. So, hello, Hockey World. It's Monday, October 5th, 2020.
I'm Michael Agello, and I do not have COVID.
I'm Jan Levine, and Eck got the decade correct.
Thank you.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Do my best here, Jan. And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday in the afternoons to talk to you about the world of hockey and the comings and goings in it. And tomorrow we will be doing it, just a program note here. We'll be starting we won't be doing a 1:00 show tomorrow afternoon. We will be we'll be charging ourselves up in hyperbolic chambers for what's about to come. Instead, we will be
hyperbolic or hyperbaric.
Hyperbaric. I like hyperbolic too.
I'm always in a hyperbolic.
Yeah, it's a great way to refer to us as the kings of hyperbole. Thanks, Zach.
Hyperbolic chambers. That's my sniglet for the day. All right, no, but
Rich Hall.
There's a good '70s reference. All right,
not necessarily the news.
He's in the hall.
Yeah.
No, not necessarily the news.
I know it's sniglets. I know. I remember.
I always said anarchaic. My favorite word I ever invented was anarchaic, which is like an old form of non-government.
No, the best is L acceleration when you keep pressing the button on an elevator.
There you go. See, that was Sniglets. Look up Sniglets in your own time, guys. But it's fun. It's fun, and it's worth. It's good to show you, especially your children. I found like little kids love Sniglets. Anyway, moving on.
5-year-old.
Where were we? Okay, so we're gonna do a show tomorrow at 6, from 6 to 9. We're gonna be doing it along with the
Kevin Allen's
podcast, which is a really good one that he does with Bob Duff. And and the Off the Post people will be stopping by. Everybody will be stopping in and out. There'll be a lot of stuff going between 6 and 9 tomorrow. We're gonna have fun with it, and there's gonna be tons to do for sure. I wanted to, before we got too much further into this, I wanted to talk about my day yesterday because, and this is like, I like hunkered down. Like the kids, it was a big day. It was a beautiful day here. This time of the year is my favorite time of year. I hate, there's nothing worse than locking yourself inside on a fall day like yesterday. But I locked myself inside. And I'm like, because I am going to get everything that happens today because things have to go crazy. Like this whole thing has to go nuts, and we always say that and never does happen. But this year I thought, okay, this is going to happen because it has to, right? And it was crickets. It was like unbelievable amounts of crickets talking to people. GMs were saying, are you hearing anything? I got a text from a GM. Are you hearing anything? like, you're the GM. So we sat here and did nothing. And then finally I talked to our buddy John Shannon, who has been on the show, and I was talking to him in the afternoon. I'm like, what do you think is going on? Like, why is it absolutely freaking dead quiet? And he put it perfectly. He's like, it's a new business model. No one knows what to do. And I think that's absolutely the case. And I think he just nailed it to a degree. This is a new business model. No one knows what to do. We're in a pandemic. We don't know. The players don't know if they're going to be making 20, 40, 60% of their salaries next year. The teams don't know if the NHL is going to do something, because there's still rumors out there that the NHL could do something to help out the salary cap situation, which I think is crazy that I don't think it's possible, because they would have had to do it by now.
Right.
But some GMs still believe that it could happen, which is kind of nuts.
By October 9th, I doubt it.
I know. I'm saying the same thing, but I'm telling you, like, people.
I'm sure if they met for 24, 48 hours straight, they probably could, but.
It's just a matter of, like, some people just want the franchise tag. Like one player that comes off the cap for 3 years.
They're not going to do it that quick. They're not.
That's what the rich teams want. One player who comes off the cap for 3 years. That during this 3-year salary freeze, the Leafs can get rid of Mitch Marner's contract or whatever you want to do.
But the problem is that should have been settled with the CBA. They're not going to. It's basically like reopening the CBA if you do that.
No, because the difference is if you put that in the CBA, it would never have flown. Okay, so they were smart not to talk about this in their CBA. We're talking about extraneous circumstances here. We're talking about like the pandemic going crazy and everybody and us not getting. What happens if we don't get any fans in for this entire season coming up? Like, what happens then? Like, there has to be something that has to give, right? And I think
that's fair.
You can't plan for that in CBA, right? Like, you can't put that in a CBA.
Right. No, I think you're right. But again, if you don't do that and have those hard conversations with the CBA, it's impossible to add it after.
Right. Exactly. And then the only way that it helps other teams, because right now, at least half the league doesn't want to spend any more money than they absolutely have to.
Right.
The only way that this makes sense is if you're giving this waiver to every team, and the money that they go out and spend above and beyond. Let's say you just said, the Leafs put Marner's contract on. They franchise tag, whatever you want to call it. And it wipes almost $11 million off the cap. They're going to go out and spend that $11 million. The other teams don't want to spend that kind of money, so the only way it makes sense to them is if that extra money is revenue shared with the lower teams.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to do that, and then you're going into a completely different business model that the bigger teams probably don't want to do.
Right. So, Timothy, screw you. Okay, that's what I'm going to say, because I just put that up there just to say that.
We got two, actually. You got one today and one
today. Man.
I know it's not like you're in charge of trades.
No, I'm not. Believe it or not, they don't run it by me.
Well, okay, let's
not the way it works. It's not like you're what you're out. The GMs from Florida called and they want to know if they can make these trades.
Let's talk about the two trades, because the one, when we were chatting back and forth about it, we were scratching our heads about why it made any sense, and it really didn't. And that was the Olli Maatta deal to LA. Now, Maatta was making a little over $4 million. Chicago retained $750K on the deal. LA traded back a borderline prospect, not anybody who's ever going to make any kind of big impact. Maatta's got 2 years left in his contract. He was basically a failure of a free agent signing with Chicago. And if you're Stan Bowman, this is a gift, because they just cleared over $3 million to be able to re-sign Kubalik, Strome, Kajula, Cuckoo, right. and go after. I mean, not all that you're going to get all that for $3 million, but they added $3 million in cap space to be able to go out and sign those guys.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know why. I don't think Maatta is a bad defenseman, and right now $3 million is basically an average salary for, say, a 4, 5, or 6. But you probably could have found that guy in free agency.
He's not a bad offensive defenseman. He is a bad defenseman, and if the Kings. The only reason I could see the Kings making this deal is if they didn't want to bring Bjornfot over for the season, and that's like, okay, or they can't, because I think he's in the SHL and it started, so they probably can't. Right. So, but the fact that he's a 2-year thing, yeah, he might be available to Seattle, but it doesn't mean Seattle wants him. And so I really don't understand the deal, really, because at the end of the day, I would have Cale Clay take that spot. There's so many guys I would have take the spot, and if we hear things like Mike was telling me the other day, like maybe LA doesn't love Clegg, or now the Blake administration doesn't love Clegg, then you know what? Teams will clamor for a guy like that, because, again, there's nothing better than a team picking up an offensive defenseman who's being undervalued with an organization and then finally getting a chance when he's ready, when he's actually ready.
You have to remember something about the Kings and the way the Kings mentality. Like, you have to look at Blake, you have to look at what's happened. The Kings have won some Stanley Cups recently. They have this mentality that they're like a predominant team. Like they think of themselves as they got to stay on the top. Once you get on the top, that's the problem, right? So once you win Stanley Cups, you got to stay there. Rebuilding is not necessarily what the Kings want to do at all. And kind of towards the end of the season, remember, right before we shut down everything, the Kings were hot as hell, right? So they went on this run where they won like 10 games in a row. And I think when I saw this trade, I'm like thinking to myself, well, Blake thinks actually that this is, that they're not in a rebuild, that they're making this move. That's what I saw when I first saw it. I don't think that they see themselves as a rebuild.
Yeah, but even if you're not in a rebuild, why Maatta, right? There's guys in free agency you can probably sign of that ilk.
2 years.
And you also, as I said, you locked yourself up now for 2 years. You probably could have maybe either signed a guy for a 1-year deal, even for a 2-year deal, at a lot less than $3.3 million per, and get the same impact as you're going to get.
Chances are, you're right. Chances are someone in that organization just likes him. Whenever I've run into this situation before and I've asked that question to people, they'll be like, oh, well, our chief of scouting has always been a huge Maatta guy. That's something you'll hear, because there's no other reason for that beyond that. It's just somebody in that organization just likes him.
Or they're getting indicators that the free agents want 3 or 4 years, and they'd rather go for a guy that's 2 years. Now, I just posted this. Elliot Friedman just tweeted this out. That Chicago, and I heard this over the weekend, that Chicago was interested in Matt Murray. Yeah. And the Blackhawks had permission to discuss an extension, and things didn't work out. Okay. I heard a number. Brian Burke mentioned it on Hockey Central this morning, and if this number is correct, then Pittsburgh is screwed, because Matt Murray, he said, and maybe it was a slip of the tongue, but if he's serious that Matt Murray was asking for like in the neighborhood of 8 to 9 million AAV, nobody is paying that. That's Vasilevsky money.
Yeah.
That's Bobrovsky money. I like him. I think he's a good goaltender, and I know he's won 2 Stanley Cups, but nobody is paying $9 million to Matt Murray when he can't stay healthy any year.
Yeah, and that's the issue, right? So the issue is the health. I mean, Matt Murray would have done himself better. It wasn't a lot of last year wasn't his fault. It was personal stuff that happened with family too. Sure. So it's kind of a spot, but he definitely needed a better year to come into negotiations than he had. Because beyond that, he's a 2 Stanley Cup winner, and that's what he's looking at. That's
He's living off of that, though, right? The problem is, so even if he put in for that, there's no way an arbitrator is awarding him anywhere near close to that number.
No,
if he comes back in arbitration, right? And if anything over about 4.54 million or so, they can walk away. Right. If he got awarded that amount of money, I wouldn't be shocked if Pittsburgh walked away. If he's going to get some kind of ridiculous figure, they already just signed Jarry, and I'm sure we'll go into it, to a relatively reasonable deal. They signed him to numbers fairly close to what Philippe Grubauer got when he went to Colorado, which is a reasonable contract based upon the expectation you have for Jarry.
Right.
Well, the qualifying offer for Murray would be a little over $4 million. If they go to arbitration and that's all that Pittsburgh offers him, and he's asking for $7 million or some ridiculous thing like that, and the arbitrator gives him that or gives him something in between. Then they're going to.
He was qualified today, and someone wrote something in the chat room. But this is true, and I heard this as well. That the Pens qualified him today for 3.75.
They can't qualify him.
Yeah, it's got to be over. It's got to be
above that.
What his last contract was.
I heard they qualified him, but that's not the number. Right?
Yeah, they did, because I know Dominique Simon was one of those guys that did not qualify. So they qualified everybody else but 2.
The minimum qualifying offer is 10% above what he was paid last year, and he was paid 3.75 last year. Right. So it would be a little over 4.
This isn't the only.
He can accept the qualifying offer, because
this isn't the only permissions that were given over the weekend either by teams. This is something that happens a lot. So we'll hear more of this as it goes along today. But I don't think if the I don't think the Penguins would walk away from 5 or 6 million. But I think because if they got Murray under contract, you could then definitely deal him. Like the problem with him right now is he's not under contract. So.
And that might be part of the reason why they did what they did today with Jack Johnson, because it opened up over $2 million in cap space.
Right. This gives them this gives, like, Rutherford hates dealing from a position of weakness, right? So this gives them something to deal with. I think that's one of the things you're going to definitely see in the next couple of days. And I've heard a lot of that today. And so I was asking people yesterday why it was so quiet. I'm like, why is it so quiet? And we talked a lot and I spent most of my day just talking to people about why it was so quiet, which was a blast. Yeah. But the day was, essentially they were one of the things was the qualifiers, like the fact that the qualifiers haven't been made. People have this impression that some guys might not be qualified, and if they're not qualified, then you can just get them for free, or you're helping a team out by picking a player up before they have to qualify them, which is another thing you don't want to do. So there's a little bit of that going on. I think most of it is honestly just fear of the unknown, that people don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, I think it's the unknown because
I just got to get through the draft. That was an interesting thing. Like, are you going to are you interested in such and such? Like Lundqvist, for example. I was talking to somebody about Lundqvist.
Yeah.
I got to get through the draft.
Right. Well, the problem is you can do that, but the qualifying offer, it's not Tuesday has been reported. It's Wednesday at 5.
Right.
Which means you're not done with the draft by the time the qualifying offers are done.
Right. No,
I think the assistant general manager's working on that.
Those are separate things. Like, getting through the draft is just like a general feeling in general. But the qualifying thing, waiting for the qualifying offers, is another reason.
Well, I mean, a team like Buffalo, I'm sure I would hope that they're getting their ducks in a row, because they have 7 restricted free agents, so they have to issue qualifying offers for 7 or whoever they want to keep.
A good example, Mike. Yesterday, like Winnipeg, they laid out the 6 they have and gave them all qualifying offers, and a lot of teams are just going to do that just for the sake of making it easier, like what X just saying.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't shock me if one day, like today, Buffalo says, "Hey, we've qualified all 7 guys. Okay, let's move on."
Look at the teams that have done. Look at the teams that we know about qualifying offers. There's not that many of them, right? So look at the teams that we know about so far. We know Pittsburgh. We know Winnipeg, right? We're talking about 2 teams now that are rumored to be trying to make big trades right now.
Yeah.
So like the fact is, Laine's out there and Murray's out there. So you're talking about those teams want to get their qualifiers done, because then another team is not going to be able to weaken them by that. So the situation is, I think it's not surprising that those are like 2 of the first teams we've heard about. And I do think that, the way this played, I laid out a scenario on my blog today, and I'll kind of lay it out quickly here. This is kind of, yesterday I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how this is going to play out. And I really think what we're going to see is very few trades until after the draft. I think you might see a couple during the draft. I think we'll see the rights of Pietrangelo and Hall.
Well, the rights ones will definitely happen.
Right. Yeah. And some little things will happen, but there will be minor trades moving up and moving down to get to some, there's possible between 5 and 15 that you could see a big trade. I was told that, that there you might see a team that wants something now.
Well, I
help them now, or for one of these, because the draft is so deep.
Montreal said they would do it. I think the Rangers would do it with their second pick. So I think it's there. Whether it gets executed, you're right. That's a
right.
whole.
But after that, let me just finish this whole thing out for a second, and then we can go on. So after that, I think you're going to see the second day of the draft is generally almost always a contingency day where teams are talking to other teams about what's going to happen after UFA day and what trades they could possibly make, and they spend a lot of time because they're in the same, usually in the same building. This year they're not, so that's going to be kind of interesting. But usually they're in the same building talking to each other. You see general managers sneaking away, and those trades don't happen that day. They happen like a week later. So then after that, so I think what you'll see is, then some UFAs sign. I think might see a few trades on Thursday, and people are gonna be like, "What the hell's happening?" Friday, you're gonna see the UFAs, and then you're gonna see a month or so of slow moving, trickling in, sorting this all out. Like no one's gonna go quickly.
It's gonna be a stare down, is what it's gonna be.
Yeah, it's gonna trickle through it because no one is willing to jump the gun. No one. There's no trade that's like altering the terrain so much that it's going to change. It's going to make other people react to it. There's not that trade out there really, or that signing out there. Like, I mean, Pietrangelo's signing with the Leafs is about as big as something like that could get, and that would be something that the rest of the conference. But is Tampa going to react to it? No, I mean Tampa's not going to react.
Well, Tampa's got their own issues, Zach, and I heard a few things over the weekend. I mean, I think it was Pierre LeBrun that reported that they asked Tyler Johnson whether he'd be willing to waive his no trade clause, and at least the preliminary indicator is that he doesn't want to. Right. They could resort to some chicanery. And this is completely legal. I was talking this over with Russ on the weekend. If say, for example, they decide, okay, we can't trade Tyler Johnson because he's got a no trade clause, we're going to place him on waivers. If they put him on waivers, the first team on waivers is the Detroit Red Wings, former GM Steve Eisen.
Right.
Okay, they claim Tyler Johnson. He has the full $5 million salary. Okay, now they can trade him back to Tampa and retain 50% of the salary. And if they do that, then all of a sudden Tyler Johnson's affordable. They could give Detroit a first-round pick or a second-round pick or something like that, and they would save.
You trade a player back to a team.
Yes,
yeah.
Waivers, not if it's a trade. If it's waivers, you can.
There's usually
via waivers you can.
On waivers, yes. On a buyout, no. I
guess this is what we saw. This isn't what we saw on Orpik, right? Like that's like
no, on Orpik they traded him to Colorado to buy him out, and then they re-signed him to do that. It's similar to that.
You could do that too.
Right. To me, what's happening here, which is obviously happening, is in Tampa. This is why Sergachev is getting discussed, because they are stuck. They know they're stuck, and it's really hard to ask guys who just won the Stanley Cup a couple days ago to waive their no trade clause. Who the hell would want to do that? Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? So they have
a team like New Jersey, and Elliot Friedman brought this up on his podcast late last week. A team like New Jersey who has 3 first-round picks.
Yeah.
One of them being from Tampa. If Tampa basically has no other option other than to trade Sergachev, they could trade him to New Jersey, who needs defensemen, and get a first-round pick back.
Which is not a horrible thing to do, because they've got so much depth. They gain space. They make New Jersey better, but New Jersey still has a ways to go. So I mean, the reality is that's okay. And I think you're going to see. At some point, Tampa's going to have to do something like put Johnson on waivers. That makes sense.
Oh, okay, Funky. I'm asking this question. I want him to respond in the chat. Okay, Tampa isn't losing Sergachev. What are they paying him with? They have $5 million in cap space. They have him. They have Cirelli as RFAs. They have a bunch of UFAs. Some of them I'm sure they want to bring back. How much is Sergachev going to take on a bridge deal? He's going to take at least $5 million on a bridge deal. They can't pay him unless they.
Here's the thing about that, though, Mike. You're absolutely right. But here's the thing: they don't have to do this for a while. Like it's
a couple of months. This
is why I said that, This is why I think is going to see this slow trickle that happens throughout the fall, because I think that there are teams that these major things like this aren't going to happen right away. Because
they could go over on the cap, but eventually that's going to come
right. You can go over like a certain amount, right?
10% over during the summer. Until you start the season, but this is the downside impact, and MC no movement clauses and no trade clauses. This is where they come back to bite you. They're a teaser or an enticer to get a player to stay with you, but then this is where, again, look, obviously Tampa and everybody else was expecting the cap to rise, and if we had the projected $86 million cap, Tampa wouldn't clearly not be in the position they're in now. But because you've now lost $5 million off the cap, everybody's squeezed, and with the NMCs and the NTCs, you can't move guys without their permission. And as you said, who's going to want to leave a Stanley Cup championship team to go?
Yeah, what better situation are they going to go to? Like what's right. I mean, you're living in Tampa. You're going to go to another team that has. I want to get traded to a team that has a chance of winning. Well, this team has a really good chance of winning again. So like, why? There's no other spot. You're not living. They aren't living in the tundra. They're living in Tampa, and they won a Stanley Cup. This is like this is hard. This is a hard sell, like for someone with a no trade clause. And I talked to people about this, and it's I mean, yes, they can waive them for sure. They can do that, but geez, that's like that is also. That stuff doesn't. They also have to do this in a way. They want to do this in a way that doesn't like make the rest of the players hate them forever. Too. There's that element of it too. Remember, they are dealing in with a very close knit group of players.
The only
they got to get Johnson. If they can trade Johnson, they got to get him someplace he wants to go to where he's happy. And that's
the big thing here is This is where you say, hey, you know what? Tyler Johnson's smart. This is what his agent could foresee what was going to happen down the road. He looked at the cap. That's what these when and it's not just an agent. Most of these are agencies, and they hire guys who do the cap too for all these teams. And when you are making a contract offer to a player, you're also looking at the cap and future cap and what teams might do as well, and what they hear and what they don't hear. And you got to give his agent credit, because now it's making him incredibly hard to trade.
Right.
And yeah, he'll either get traded to a place he wants to go or he won't go.
Yeah, and we talked about this during the shutdown about specific players, and Tyler Johnson is from Spokane, Washington. You don't think that he might want to go to Seattle?
That's a fun thing.
But that's 1 year away. So right now Tampa can't afford his $5 million salary. So I mean, could he go someplace for a year and then they guarantee they're going to trade him to Seattle? Maybe that could be worked out. I mean, you don't know, but it's tough to negotiate with a team that's not even in the league yet. So you can't really do it. But Tampa Bay, I mean, I'm looking at their situation right now. You've got that middle of the road group: Yanni Gourde, Palat, Johnson, all with no trades. They're not trading Braden Point because he's one of the best young players in the league. Kucherov and Stamkos have no move clauses. Killorn is the only one who's got a modified no trade, and he's making. But they don't
16 teams.
Right, but they don't want to get rid of him because he's a big forward. And he's still good. Now, the one piece of the puzzle we still have to factor in is, remember, we talked about last year, Stamkos had the surgery. If that surgery delays him into the season, long-term IR is still a possibility, which frees up cap room, at least until he's ready to return. And so that clearly is a potential factor that they may take into effect and may necessarily utilize. Look, it's not the ideal, right? None of these scenarios are ideal. Look, I think we talk about Sergachev. He is at the bottom of the list, in my opinion, as options for them in terms of migration and movement. Right. But they have to explore every single possibility. Stamkos potentially is an LTIR candidate given the issue, and if he had a setback, and if he does require some kind of surgery again, depending on when they start the season, that could sideline him into the season, buying them additional space and time.
That's 100% true. And Sergachev is the final thing that they would like to try. But at the same time, he is also a valuable piece. And so if you're going to go through this hell anyway, like Mike said, you might as well get yourself a couple first-round draft picks or something like that, like something that really significantly changes things around. Like Sergachev can get you a lot. And your point is right, Act. It's like, if you remember last year, Marner, Rantanen, Point, all those contracts were signed in September around the opening of training camp. So we're talking if they want to put a chill out there and say, okay, we're not going to sign you until November before training camp, and we only have this kind of space. He could very well go to the KHL and say, screw this. That's an option for him. Like it was an option for some of these other players too. Problem with that option right now, and I talked to somebody about that yesterday, is the pandemic is not the thrill. Is not the thrill of going to the KHL right now for these guys who make all this money. It's like it is safer here, I mean, and at the end of the day, making like $5 or $6 million over there for half a year or whatever, or even a whole year, tax free. They still got to play in the KHL. They still have that risk of what, and that they realize that the NHL did it. Even as much as they hated the bubble, everyone's safe. Like everyone here is safe. No one in the league has it. That's big. There's a quick question here. So is tomorrow's show going to be here And yes, it's sort of okay. So the answer is sort of okay. So if you go to my blog tomorrow, right like in the afternoon, 4 or 5 or somewhere in there, you'll see as you'll be able to watch it just like you've always watched it. It's going to actually technically be on Kevin's feed though, but it's also going to be done in the same.
Yeah, it's on
StreamYard, so it's StreamYard as well. So you'll be able to talk in the chat room just the same. It doesn't really matter what feed it's on to you guys anyway. But so you'll be in the same place. You'll be able to find it in the same place. And then for the UFA day, it'll be the same, except it'll be on our feed. So it's the only difference that you're talking about. Anyway, just to let you know.
Hey, Eck, not to interrupt. Did you talk about Donato or no?
No, we have not talked about Donato yet. And I heard something that has connected to this. So why don't we talk about Donato first? Because this is a really sneaky little move by San Jose.
It is.
Yeah, I like the move.
I mean, San Jose, who needs this? They need players like this in a big way. Like they've gotten really different.
Let me ask you, because I know that you thought when Minnesota acquired Donato that they got a steal in Donato, and it didn't work. It didn't work out in Minnesota.
I mean, they got 14 goals, so it did partially work out.
Right, but I think that remember, I think he was part of the Coyle deal. They probably had more expectations than that, and now you have to be worried, even though I think he's a good player and he could thrive in San Jose, that now all of a sudden, okay, now he's been moved from Boston to Minnesota to San Jose. It's like at a certain point he gets a reputation of, okay, he's a troubled guy or something like that.
No, I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think what it has to do with is you have to be committed to giving him a spot. Like, he's got 29 career goals, only 5 on the power play. This guy has an amazing shot. But you have to put him on the power play if you want more than like 14 even strength goals with 10 minutes a game. You have to be certain, you have to be commit to a certain amount. Now, he could take a Donskoy role in San Jose, and if they give him second power play time, you can get 20-something goals out of him, maybe even 25.
And he's obviously that kind of shot. Big time. He's a big goal. He's a big game player, big times, things like that. That's kind
of a good skater. His play away from the puck, San Jose will work on that with him. But I think what happened here with Minnesota is they probably had decided they don't want to give him his next contract. So new GM, and they moved him in, and he got him, and now he decided, all right, you know what? He's not in my future plans. But I don't think it has to do with that. We've seen enough players move around in recent years that I really do think it's just about finding the right spot, because every team would want a guy who could score 15 goals no matter what, as long as the pay isn't $6 million a year.
For this trade to happen, and Billy Guerin, who's a USA Hockey guy, to make this move was a little bit surprising to me, because Donato, obviously, Billy Guerin's always been about that. And Donato has been a very key guy for USA Hockey. It was a little surprising, but also tells me that and clearly, and I talked to my sources in Minnesota, that this is just that they're up to something much bigger than this. This is something to set up for something else, and the same thing you're going to see today with Dubnyk being traded later. This is to set up for something.
Yeah. Well, what's he making?
He only paid $1.9 million in salary with Donato. I mean, he's not making a big figure.
No, but it's more about. It's
more culture again, right? That's the thing we've talked about, is changing the culture. Though Donato wasn't there that long, I think, to be part of the fabric of the true culture, right? San Jose gets probably a third line winger to start with, is probably where they'll probably have him penciled in. Second line power play is probably the usage that'll get. It depends on kind of what else to do with Hertl and LeBlanc and Kane's still there. I don't necessarily see him on a first or a second line, but I would probably see him on a third line and potentially second line power play.
I mean, it is interesting that Donato was traded from the Bruins, who are all about culture too, and Minnesota's now traded him. And I never got the impression that Donato was a bad locker room guy. Right?
No, I mean, I think the Bruins showcased him. I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I've interviewed this kid a bunch of times, his dad, otherwise, and I don't think there's an issue with the kid. I do think, if you're trying to have a certain type of team, he may not fit the scope of what you're trying to do. But that's why I said he's kind of like a Donskoy kind of player, where he's not as good defensively. I get that. But he's a third line talent. He's got a great shot. He's fast. He has certain spots on the ice where if you get him the puck and he could shoot, he's going to score goals. And he's going to score more than 14. And so I think San Jose looked at that and said, we could do something with that.
And they gave up nothing for it.
Right.
That's the crazy thing. They gave up. It was as if they had to trade Donato almost, because he's
24 years old.
They give up a third-round pick for him for even a 14-goal player. That's insane. I mean, honestly,
you have his rights though for a while, right? So you're projecting that you're probably going to re-sign him. He's got RFA with Arbor rights. You're probably going to keep him for another year, at least in a minimum, maybe 2, possibly longer, depending on how he pans out there. So a third rounder for a guy you may have for 3-4 years is probably not a bad exchange.
Yeah,
and it's true he's not a great skater, and it was brought up in our chat room too. And I mean, but he is a clutch performer, and we've seen that, like, and that to me is something that, having been like a quasi Sharks fan for all these years, I will take clutch performers on that team, because that team is a team that always lacked people to score the big goal at the big time. Like that's always been an issue with the Sharks, right? Forever. Minnesota's goaltending situation is something I want to talk about next, because I think this could be leading into that. And we have heard 3 names. Okay, like I brought up Lundqvist, over the weekend, hearing that he, we know that Lundqvist is going to go someplace where he can compete, where he wants to go, where he's comfortable, where his family's comfortable. Those are the 3 things I've heard. So, okay, Minnesota they're competitive. They're one of the best defensive teams in the league. That's a nice thing. And also, his buddy Matt Zuccarello, who we all know he's incredibly close to, plays there. And can't go anywhere because he's got a no movement clause, and it's not a contract that they're thrilled about in Minnesota. But this could maybe also elevate Zuccarello's game, which would be important for them. So that's one name, and we'll get into Lundqvist right after this too more. The other name, Matt Murray, played with Billy Guerin, obviously in Pittsburgh. Bill Guerin, knows Matt Murray really well. Won Stanley Cups with Matt Murray, knows what he's all about. I'm sure thinks Matt Murray is being treated poorly in Pittsburgh. I would bet anything that Guerin thinks he's getting screwed in Pittsburgh. And I think that's a lot of, they got to do a lot to make that happen. Third off.
Well, there is breaking news with Murray though.
All right.
Elliot Friedman reported. You did that?
Yeah,
we did talk about that.
Okay, so I mean, that's going to muck up the works a little bit.
That didn't happen. So the reality, and usually if you hear something like that didn't happen, that's not going to be they're not going to re-examine that. Like, so
but
there's the final name, Mike, and then we'll talk about this. Sorry, final name. And this name is really, and I just heard Mike Russo talk about this, and Russo is as connected to anybody with the Wild. And I really do buy this, is that they have serious interest in Marc-Andre Fleury in Minnesota. So you're looking at another Guerin teammate, another goalie who is now. This is the thing about Marc-Andre Fleury that benefits them, is they have the AHL goalie of the year, right? Last year, they have some really good prospects. Right. So you get Matt Murray. He's your goalie for the next decade, right? Like that's how you look at Matt Murray, because he's. Or at least the next 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, I think you go 5.
If you get Fleury, it's 2 years, and
Fleury's 2 years, perfect amount of time to get these other young goalies in there, right? So
more than likely, because we saw the contract that Leonard signed, which was 5 years, $25 million, $5 million AAV. If Kelly McCrimmon had basically said, okay, I'm allocating $7 million towards my goaltending for the next 2 years with Fleury, then if you're all of a sudden you've got your starter with Leonard at 5, you can retain $2 million of Fleury's contract to move it out.
Right.
No, I don't think anybody is taking Fleury at 7. McCrimmon is going to have to
either, but I think that Vegas is aware that they're going to have to keep some money to make that happen. And I think the other thing that Fleury has done, which is really smart on his own part, is he's made it known that he's fine staying there, which is not, he has not put the gun to their head, which is really interesting, because obviously he's not fine staying there. But by saying he's fine staying there, he does force a trade in a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the whole world knows it's not fine.
But so here, this is just out to
guys. One bit of breaking news, according to Pierre LeBrun, is that Matt Niskanen is considering retirement.
Yeah, I'm asking someone else close to it if that's
true. Vespis in the chat room some little love here, because we appreciate putting this up there. We always look like when you guys, because we're doing the show, we appreciate you guys following Twitter a little bit.
That's from Elliot Friedman. That one.
This is from Elliot Friedman. Okay, still getting.
Yeah, I'm asking someone closer than that. I am.
What was that?
I'm asking someone closer than these guys getting.
Yeah, we can get to this. I just texted somebody too, but you might be able to get to it faster than me. This is an interesting one though. Matt Niskanen, was an effective player, but was less effective as the season went on. I would say.
Remember when they signed the deal? This is what I was worried about, is because he had played a lot of hard minutes.
Yeah,
I've seen him break down at times. He got a break when the season stopped. And when he came back, he was good for a little while, but then the wheels were coming off again towards the end.
Yeah, I don't mean to be a jerk here, but I think that if I'm Matt Niskanen, this is something that, and I'm not saying I would do this at all because I don't think I think Matt Niskanen can still play. But here's the reality of it. If I was Matt Niskanen or any hockey player and I've made a lot of money, at this point I'm 33 years old and this pandemic is going on and stuff like that, and you're hearing the way you're going to have to go into another bubble or whatever, retirement's not a bad idea. Like
and it's not like his contract was front loaded or back loaded.
Right.
He's making $575 next year in the final year of his contract, but 20% of that is escrow, 10% is rollback, and if there is a prorated thing, then he's going to be making a lot less than $575. So if he thinks he's done, I mean, this is good. In a way, it's good news and bad news for Chuck Fletcher, because now all of a sudden a defenseman that you thought was going to be there is not going to be there. I don't think it's going to make them change their mind on trading Gostisbehere, but it puts them in the market for another defenseman, I would think.
I tell you that the number one name I would go for is Matt Dumba, because Fletcher has a relationship. I could see him calling Guerin. You can't put Gostisbehere and Provorov together. It's a nightmare. They've tried it. It doesn't work. And if you put Dumba with Provorov, then you could really have something there, because while they're both offensive, they're offensive in different ways. And that way they both can cover for each other. Then that top pairing would be fine. But this is critical for the Flyers because, again, if they start losing a little bit on their top pairing, it's not like Myers or Sanheim are ready to be top pairing guys. They're not.
Well, but that could put them into the Krug sweepstakes now. Right, that $5.75 million. The difference
I think Pietrangelo is more their style.
Yep, he also I think would be in the mix, especially if they're going to move on from Gostisbehere. And then another name has been mentioned in the chat room. Kevin Shattenkirk is a free agent.
Well, I mentioned Shattenkirk over the weekend.
So that we talked about it as a maybe, not as a number one, but as a maybe option there.
I heard about that. I'm going to tell you flat out. This is from a Flyer source that I really trust on Shattenkirk. Was that the feeling was that if what's his name didn't Braun, if Jason Braun doesn't come back, that Shattenkirk was their play, and that's
I could see that for that. But now they need a number two,
right? So this
bring in another guy
in a much different way.
They're already loaded when it comes to 3, 4, 5, 6, and beyond. They've got plenty of guys for that, and young guys too. But they don't have a two.
Right. I'll give you that.
If you're going to be a contending team, if you're going to
it's especially important when you've got a guy like Provorov, who's like
and if they need a two, they need a right-handed two, because Provorov's a lefty. So Braun, if they re-sign Braun's not capable of playing in the top pairing. So that puts you in the market for Pietrangelo if he's there, for TJ Brody, for Dylan DeMello, for Radko Gudas.
There's a righty too.
What's that?
Dumba is a righty.
And Guerin has made that known. Believe me, I've heard that's part of his pitch. Dumba's getting a right-handed defenseman, that kind of thing. So,
if that kind of deal happened, you could then obviously with what's going on in Minnesota right now, they're probably going to want a high draft pick and one of those young forwards.
The interesting thing about this Niskanen thing coming out right now, though, the timing of it is interesting to me. Like this is not something that if Niskanen does this, he's doing the Flyers a serious swell here by doing it right now. Like he doesn't have to do this right now.
Oh, I don't think he's doing them any favors, Zach. I think
this tweet from Pierre LeBrun. If I had to guess, I presume the Flyers would suspend Niskanen, like the Jets did with Dustin Byfuglien, in order to keep the door open for Niskanen to change his mind next season and maybe rejoin the Flyers, as long as Niskanen doesn't file retirement papers.
Oh, man, that's intriguing. You think he's not doing him any favors?
I
don't know.
Friedman just reported he is retiring.
Okay,
he is retiring.
He is retiring.
I'm not as on the same page with you guys that this isn't doing the Flyers a favor right now.
So he took some time to think about it.
They're out there that they could go after.
He took some time to think about it. He did, and now he's retiring. And if you remember a long time ago, I thought maybe they would try and clear some room for Pietrangelo, but now they're sort of behind in those sweepstakes, but they're going to try and get in it, I'm sure. And
in that same tweet, Friedman said the Flyers are working on re-signing Braun.
Yeah, because they want another veteran there, but they still are going to trade for a two. Or, like Funky said, they will try on Krug, because we're talking about all these guys. It doesn't mean they're going to succeed at any of them.
I would say in some ways Krug is a better bet than Pietrangelo, because
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well,
Such a major investment.
Well, do you think then they move?
Pietrangelo has. I'm going to say go out on a limb here and tell you that as good as Pietrangelo is, like over the last couple of years, if you were to say who's the more consistent player all the time, Pietrangelo has his moments. You know, like
they're completely
pretty solid.
They're completely.
You're talking offensive X, sure, but there's a lot of things Pietrangelo does that Krug can't do.
Right, and okay, if we're talking about top pairing here.
Right.
He's a lefty defenseman. He's a left side defenseman.
Right.
You can't put him and Provorov together. So does that mean you put Philippe Myers on the number one pairing? Okay, then Sanheim's a lefty and Krug's a lefty. Now Philadelphia is in the same boat as Winnipeg, as Toronto. They need a top pairing right hand shot defenseman, and that's a market.
I want to thank him for doing this during the show because that never happened.
Well, let's talk about this before because
I'm gonna have to update the website with something real quick, guys.
Go ahead. We'll carry it out. Yep. Okay, Jan, the goalie, like the whole goalie thing that happened on the weekend. Elliott signs a $1.5 million extension. Laurent Brasseau with Winnipeg, same thing. Leonard with the $5 million, and then Jari. I mean, the picture became a little bit clearer, and now I think we see. Murray is on the way out, probably in Pittsburgh, and I think definitely Fleury is on the way out in Vegas. But both those moves are difficult because Fleury's got $7 million in cap space, and Murray's asking for a lot of money.
Well, so the Jari move we expected, right? The only question was what the dollar figure would be, and I think from a Pittsburgh perspective, it came in at a figure that's more than palatable for them, especially given what we thought he might get, though. I mean, Jari is not necessarily proven himself. As I mentioned, this is like Philippe Grubauer a couple of years ago. Remember with Washington when he went to Colorado, a very similar cap hit, within about a couple $100,000 of each other. The Leonard, we kind of knew this was a quote unquote done deal. It was just a matter of the formality of it actually being announced, even though we had the years and the dollar figure fairly set a while ago. But the Fleury, I mean, they've talked about. Vegas is going to have to eat some cap room in order to be able to move him. You have to figure at least $2 to $3 million is what they're going to have to eat to get him into the $4 to $5 million range. And at that range, there likely will be a number of suitors depending on what the cost associated to acquire is. With Jari, the Murray, there is clearly movement taking place or potential movement taking place. If he did end up in Chicago, that likely most certainly would have signaled the end of Corey Crawford there. Even though I think most of us expected Crawford to be back there. Now that might be off the table, even though that the negotiations haven't broken down completely. Mm-hmm. The question now is, okay, where do you foresee Murray going? Edmonton, we've talked about, right? We've talked about Calgary, though not necessarily the number one option there. We want to get into it now. We talked about Lundqvist also, right? Lundqvist is a name that's come up. Elliot Friedman reported with Chris Johnson today, Washington could be in the mix with Holtby quite possibly not coming back. And we've talked about that before and where he may end up going. And Samsonov not necessarily being fully, he's not proven by any stretch of the imagination. Clearly, there's always been an affinity between Lundqvist and Ovechkin, and there is no shortage of suitors. Washington, we talked about Boston being a potential option, but Washington, proximity-wise to New York, is pretty similar in terms of distance. So he could have his family stay in New York if he wanted to, and still potentially make it back here periodically. So there is a lot of the migration and movement. You can start to see cracks in terms of where players are going to go, but there's clearly a lot of goalies still in the marketplace that have to be determined in terms of landing spots.
Well, Vancouver was another option that someone reported this morning in terms of Lundqvist, but that would be going into the yeah. I don't think that makes a lot of sense.
Washington, but that's only if Washington decides that they can't come to a deal with Holtby, which we don't know yet.
Now, right, but it gives them options, right? It also forces Holtby to a certain extent to recognize that decision. They kind of force his hand a bit. I mean, look, this information is leaked for a reason, as we all know.
Sure.
So that kind of pushes Holtby to say, "Hey, look, we got another option there. If you're not going to basically work with us."
Well, the one thing that because I was on the conference call this morning with Kyle with the Toronto media with Kyle Dubas, and he came out and basically when asked about Freddie Anderson, essentially said Freddie Anderson is our goaltender for next year. I find that curious that comes out, the same day as supposedly Matt Murray looking.
You learned nothing, Mike. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do.
I know. Let me finish.
Please finish, Mike. I'm sorry. Please.
No, because I was just about to say that. I know that general managers talk at both sides of their mouth. I realize that, and if the situation changes, then yeah, but I also think that if Matt Murray's out there, like Brian Burke said, asking for $8 to $9 million a year, nobody's going to be interested in trading for him. And I think that's the guy number one on the Leafs list. If they're going to trade for a goaltender to replace Freddie Anderson and then trade Freddie Anderson someplace else, I think the guy that they want is Matt Murray, but not at $8 million. If Matt Murray's going to come in at 5.5, then I might think they might be interested in him. But he's there's no way that anybody who's a contender right now can afford to trade for Matt Murray.
Gibas is saying that because he knows these other things are going on, so he knows there's a chance he's not going to get the other guy he would truly want. So he can't kill Anderson. He's got to say he's his goalie.
And I was going to say, you've always told me that these general managers lie. So that's and I'm going to say, he's blatantly right now. He's saying what is true at the moment, but
it's more than it's not lying. It's expiration dates, right? Like like it is true now. Like right now, as of this moment,
exactly.
Marc-Andre Fleury is a Vegas Golden Knight. Like that's not a lie. That's true. So,
by the way, the information that I got, nobody really saw this coming.
No one saw. I got the same. Go ahead, continue.
No, that's it.
They're absolutely in shock, and they don't. And it's like
this is going to change. This is going to turn this team upside down now a little bit, because that was the one thing that was rock solid for them all year, and now it's not.
Yeah, and the day before the draft too. So now,
right.
Not that a draft pick is.
Someone saying I'm writing this. I'm tweeting this out right now.
But there's no defenseman they could trade up for that's going to play this year that's going to have an impact.
Right.
Yeah, he might be and someone told me this. He really might be the first casualty of the pandemic. Of basically saying.
Yeah, I think he's without saying it. I do think that's a factor.
Yeah, because, say, for example, the season doesn't start until January. There's all this uncertainty about what's going on. And he's just saying, okay, you know what? On the contract that I signed, I got 35 of the $40 million on the final year. I was planning on retiring after the season anyway. You know what? Chuck the $5 million, put it towards somebody else. See you later.
Listen, this is the best thing that could happen to the Flyers from a cap standpoint, because this was a bad deal. It was a bad deal when they signed it.
Yeah, when they signed it, and Niskanen really struggled in the bubble. Like he probably did really bad. Like not just like little bit bad. Like he was, and I think also that him playing that badly in the bubble shows me, maybe he's like a family guy who really. You guys know me. I'm like a crazy family guy. It would affect.
You would be horrible in the bubble.
It would affect me in a major way, right? So it's like there are players like that. I mean, and I think I honestly do believe it affected Giroux a lot, not being around his kid.
I would have been horrible in the bubble.
I'd love being in the bubble.
You already are in a bubble.
Oh man, nice. There we go. We need
I lobbed that softball up for you. There you go.
Boy, you know what we really
I wasn't about to miss it, given how long it was hanging.
Someone in the chat room to volunteer to do this for us, okay? When a moment like this happens, that is this funny and this just because usually it's against me, so that's why I bring it up. Okay? But when something like this happens, I need you to someone just out there keep notes on the date and the time in the show, and so at the end of the year I can put together like a greatest moments of the year thing. So just if anyone like volunteer to do that, I will give you a Hockey Buzz season ticket for a year if you're the first volunteer to do this. Just do this for me so that we can at the end of the year just go back and make all these little edits and put together like a funny end of the year show, because this is one of those moments for sure. Thank you.
Okay, so
this is still got to get this out here. 1 second.
No. I want to talk about the draft. We'll talk about it more tomorrow.
I can tell you one obvious thing about the draft.
Go ahead. And
that is not all players are getting the box with 31 hats. I can tell you that.
Oh
yeah, the box with 31 hats. That's a fun thing to talk about.
They did that.
You don't know it. It's like 55 players, I heard.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the number. I know that Dylan Holloway did because I got that information from Dylan Holloway. But the idea is they're not all getting that. There are some that are getting a lot less.
Are we saying like Alexis Lafreniere is getting 3 hats? Is what you're telling me?
He's probably getting 1 hat.
Yeah.
Well, I would give him 3.
No, I think he's getting 1 hat, Jam.
Somebody came out yesterday.
Look, makes my life easier because I don't have to worry about putting other names in a blog, so it makes my life a lot easier, of course.
Somebody came out yesterday.
The guy I want to go number 1 anyway.
That Lafreniere is going to be picked by the. I mean, just shut the hell up, please. Yeah.
But they're not giving.
Nothing is guaranteed until it's guaranteed, and you should know that by now.
Yeah. There's no need to give Byfield and Stützle 31 hats. There's not.
Right.
I
give them 4 in case there's a trade up.
And Jeff Marek was talking about this today, right? And he said something that I think is wrong. Okay, because I love Jeff. Jeff's one of my buddies, but he said that and I've heard that this might have happened once, but this is not standard procedure. That the jersey of the team that doesn't win the Stanley Cup, usually is destroyed. And now he said that they're sent to third world countries where.
Oh, you mean the shirt?
The T-shirt,
right? The T-shirt. Dallas Stars 2020, Dallas Stars 2020. Now I know they may have done that recently, but I had this experience with this in Carolina for Game 7 of Carolina Edmonton, and I happened upon something like I just happened upon the boxes of both of the shirts. Like I was walking around in the bowels of the building, and I saw the Edmonton Oilers Stanley Cup champions, Carolina Hurricanes Stanley Cup champions shirts, right? Sure. And there was a guy sitting there guarding them. And I said, so what happens to these things? What happens? And he says, yes, we have to destroy them. That's the obligation. We destroy them because, we don't want anyone ever wearing that. We're becoming popular. That may have changed since then, but
there are lots of San Francisco 49ers Super Bowl champ T-shirts in Zimbabwe.
Right. Like imagine all the Buffalo Bills shirts, that are out there, Mike,
4 times.
Geez, this is just like this.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, remember they have it because usually they have a bunch of them because the concession stands put them on sale right after the game.
Right. No,
the only play we had to worry about was the players and maybe maybe their families a little bit and the organization.
So I drove down to Carolina, right, and I was driving back after the game the next day, and I saw a stand. There was a guy just by the road selling Carolina Hurricanes. This is the day after they won the Stanley Cup over at Edmonton. And I went to him and I'm like, do you have any Oilers shirts, like that, because did you get, he's like, well, no, it's funny you say that. I actually was sent both, even though I'm just in Carolina. And I'm like, so you have these Oilers shirts? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, I'll give you $100 for one of them. I said, I just want one because I have a good friend whose birthday was that weekend. And I wanted to send him an Edmonton Oilers Stanley Cup champion shirt. I thought that would be great. And he wouldn't do it and said that there was this unbelievable thing about that you would never get shirts again. And it's amazing to me that exists. Obviously, anyone can make a shirt, in their own house now, but it's just the reality of this is pretty funny. Anyway.
So something else about the draft. So what we are looking at now when people are talking about picks and they haven't seen players in 7 months, a lot of what you're hearing is dated material because a lot of guys got stronger over the time where there was a pause. Now they're back practicing with teams. Some are playing with teams. Right. So some have already had their summer development before they've been drafted. So there's a lot of old narratives on some players, and you got to be careful about it.
I got some of that yesterday listening to the shows on XM, the draft shows on XM. Russ, I missed you. I missed you on the draft.
I appreciate it.
I really did because the guys are doing. Obviously, Shane did it, and the other guy did it.
And Brad Allen. Brad's great.
He's obviously incredibly knowledgeable and knows and has a ton of staff working for him and all different sorts of things to be able to have the knowledge he has. But I miss that kind of stuff because
he's his own staff, believe it or not. He really is.
He is pretty impressive.
Well, listen to.
But I miss that you're greater perspective on it.
Listen to our post this weekend, because we had Russ and Shane on the show. But
I heard that too. I saw that too. That was good.
But no, this is the thing. This is where the inside source. Where the inside sources where NHL general managers have an in with certain organizations is going to pay off because if they know that a certain player is gotten 15 pounds heavier and is stronger, that's going to give them an in. You're going to see 2 or 3 years down the road when a guy who was a steal in the middle of the first round ends up being a star, and they say, "Well, how did you know that?" It was probably because there was some connection that the general manager had with that player that he had inside knowledge of. So, that's going to pay off. Now, I'll tell you this: I asked this question of Kyle Dubas on the conference call, and I mentioned this to Russ. What's going to be at play here? CHL players, when they're drafted, there's a 2-year window to get them signed or they go back into the draft.
Mm-hmm.
That window is even shorter now because it's 19 months. It's not even a full 2 years. If they go back to the draft being in June, by June the 1st of the previous of that draft, they have to have those players signed to an entry-level contract. And if not, they go back in the draft. That could have a chilling effect, not on the first round. If a player is good and he's playing in the WHL or the Q or the OHL, they're going to get drafted there. But later on in the draft, I asked Dubas, I says, is this going to have an effect on, would teams rather draft NCAA players or European players because the window to evaluate them is longer? And he's like, well, we have confidence in our guys knowing CHL players, but you have to admit that window is going to be even shorter. Of course.
Right. So here's
great point.
Yeah. And here's what I talked about and what we talked about with Shane the other day is there's now going to be a big mix of what you see live and video, and not every team is set up for that. So that's another thing where you may have some key scouts in certain areas for your team, and they may not have watched any video. They may have watched just only that guy live, and now you're going to throw video at them, but you don't know how good that guy is evaluating video because it's different than when you're evaluating them live. So, and you don't know how that's going to work out. So there are teams that are going to have benefits. There's teams that are going to suffer. But let's answer a few of the questions in the chat room. Everybody's going crazy about Detroit. Obviously, there's not one answer because they need so many things. If they got Drysdale, that'd be great. If they got Rossi, that'd be great. But they have so many. You know, I think what Yzerman is looking for is, believe it or not, another center. I don't know if it's going to be Perfetti. It could be Rossi. But I do think he's kind of leaning that way, even though, yes, Drysdale would be great, but they have Seider. I think he is looking for another guy to help lead, and he knows that it's strong down the middle is good. And that's something where and again, there's nothing coming out of Detroit. Like, we don't know how they're
– Jesus, no. I mean, you're not – I mean, Kevin Allen, who we know as the connections out the wazoo and lives in Detroit and lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan, has covered since the day he came in, will be the first to tell you that he won't get a frigging thing out of him.
No, but there's 5 guys that Detroit could take. If you want to put a Scarroff in that mix, there's at least 5 guys they could take, and none of it would be surprising. But I can tell you, other than the way he treated Perfetti on the call to kind of give him that extra testing, maybe that meant that he favored him, but it still doesn't mean at the end of the day, after they talk it all over at the draft table, that it's not going to change. So
I mean, it could be Perfetti, it could be Sanderson, it could be Drysdale, it could be
It could be Rossi, it could be Askarov, could be. I mean,
Drysdale is the best defenseman in this draft, but it's still not impossible somebody takes Sanderson ahead of him. I mean, that possibility exists. Now, Mark is saying, wouldn't Ottawa take Drysdale? Ottawa would take Drysdale if they got Stützle. Now, again, I'm holding Dorian to his word that they want to get somebody who could play in the NHL right away. If for some reason Stützle goes to LA, and
I think that's what's going to happen too. That's what it sounds like it's going to happen.
I still think it's 50-50, but let's say it does happen. If Ottawa gets Byfield, I don't think they're going to force him into the NHL. Now, if they do, that's on them, but I don't think they will. So if they went and got, Byfield, and then they took Drysdale with their next pick, chances are they're not going to have a player in there. And I think the only reason Dorian would say that is because of his owner, his boss.
It keeps going.
I think you're right.
It keeps going back and forth with LA. It's like I've heard. Well, they're going to draft Byfield because Byfield is a similar in stature and type of player as Kopitar, and they would want him to learn under Kopitar to be the next Kopitar. Whereas Stützle maybe has a higher skill set, but there's some people who dispute whether he's ready to be an NHL.
Here's what I heard about that. It was interesting. I'm starting to get. I don't get many draft rumors, but this is from a good one. We had 2 good sources actually. So everyone, the Kings really believe that Stützle, that's who Ottawa wants, and Ottawa would take him at number 2 if they had number 2. And therefore, the Kings are starting to say that they're going to take him. And
to get Ottawa to trade up.
The question is, can they get Ottawa to flip it? Now the feeling is that who's the better player? No one really. Obviously, they're totally different players.
They're different exact science.
Honestly, if you're playing Stützle in the NHL right away, he's not playing center. And then if you're playing him in the NHL right away on wing, he's going to need a couple of years to play center. You can't send him back. Dubois got to go back and learn how to be a center. You're not going to do that with Stützle. So then the chance of him being a center really starts to slim down.
And here's the thing about all that, though, because there's more to this. Okay, so there's the feeling is that Ottawa wants to pick Askarov with their 5th pick, but only if they get Stützle. So it's like that's that. So and I want to talk about Askarov for a second, okay? Because I talked to somebody yesterday who brought up a really fascinating point. Obviously, this he is listening to that show yesterday, the Hockey Prospects. That guy thought he thinks he's the best goalie in the since maybe even better than Carey Price, right? So that he's really high on him. Yeah,
that's super high.
That is super high, right? He also thinks that the Islanders goalie that's coming over, is the best goalie in the world right now. So that was another. Anyway,
he's not. Honestly, I believe Shesterkin's better than Sorokin. Here's how I know that's probably true, because when they were both together on the national team, Shesterkin beat him out for the job.
Right, and Russian, they're hardcore. Like they're not going to play anybody unless
they were both on the same World Junior team.
So let's go back to the 2005 draft for a second, okay? Because the interesting thing about this, when you ask where this goalie Askarov should go, remember we all remember Sidney Crosby went number 1.
Yeah.
Okay. The next 2 players, interestingly enough, have been bought out in the last week. Bobby Ryan, number 2, Jack Johnson, number 3.
Yeah.
Number 4, Benoit Pouliot.
Was a bust.
Who was a bust? I mean,
the offensive zone penalties.
Right.
He did get some goals.
Number 5, Carey Price.
Yeah.
All right. Then you have Gilbert Brulé, Jack Gilly, Devin Setaguchi, Brian Lee, Luc Bourdon, and number 11, Anze Kopitar.
Right.
Number 12, Mark Stahl. So let's look. I mean, this is 15 years ago. Okay. So
we're saying that the drafting is an exact science is what we're going with?
Right. But I'm also saying that the most valuable players on this list by far have been, obviously Crosby, who's a no-brainer. Kopitar, who was at 11, a lot of people skipped on him, but then the other guy is obviously Carey Price, who's one of the best goalies of all time. So, when you look at Askarov, you got to remember this kind of stuff. Like this is like, to me, if he is that good, if people believe he is that good, you got to think about that.
Okay, but we have to remember this. Like I have still the 05 draft, and I think I ranked Kopitar like somewhere between 10 and 13. And I think I was high for some people. You got to remember, he's coming from Slovenia. There's not a good track record of Slovenian players in the NHL.
He played against nobody, right?
But he played in the World Championship. So that gave a little bit of a glimpse of what he could do. But teams were still unwilling to take a risk. That really had nothing to do with Kopitar. It had to do with other GMs going with safe guys like Jack Skilly, who played for the national team, saying, okay, this guy's going to play in the NHL, which he did. He just wasn't very good.
You know who people compared Kopitar to at that 2005 draft, and I remember it as well because they compared him to a guy who was drafted by the Leafs. They compared him to Nick Antropov because Nick Antropov was out of Kazakhstan, and he was he was a center in Kazakhstan, but he played on the wing because he was slow, and he was like 6'4", 6'5", and there were those comparisons. So
Kopitar's a way better skater.
Who did the Leafs take at 21, Mike?
Yeah.
What's that?
Who did the Leafs take at 21 in 2005?
2005. Oh, yes, that's right. The guy that they traded for Andrew Raycroft.
Tuukka Rask, yeah. Now, there's only a couple players from the two. It's amazing when you look at this list, too. Like, there's so many players in here that are gone, retired, or whatever. But Matt Niskanen was taken 28th in 2005.
Now, I will tell you this about Rask. Having covered, that was my first World Junior I covered live. I saw him. I was like, this kid's unbelievable. I read you that one little piece that I had still on my computer about him. And I was thinking, man, the Leafs are set. They are set for a long time for a goalie. And Berkey changed the narrative in the wrong way.
The Fergler.
Oh, that's right. It was
that was not Burke, and Burke was very critical of that trade.
Yeah. You're right. It was
that was one of the things he talked about endlessly about how mad he was about that trade.
What went on there. Now, Justin Pogge, just so they know, he was a very by the book kind of goalie. He wasn't great at anything. He was on a very talented team, so he won a gold medal. That is why Justin Pogge got drafted, but he never did anything great. Well, nobody ever looked at him like he was super fantastic. Rask was.
The interesting thing about this is Crosby is still good. It's really good.
This is the thing. Wait. Let me just finish it.
Think about that.
This is the thing about that trade, Russ, that drives me crazy to this day. John Ferguson Jr. was given the choice by Jeff Gorton. Either one of the goalies for Raycroft. Now, Raycroft was Rookie of the Year, who had a terrible year his second year. They were looking to dump him because they had Tim Thomas coming, and they thought we'll go with Tim Thomas and we'll get a future goalie. And Tim, in a couple years, that guy will be our number one. And Ferguson chose Rask because Pogge was the Canadian goalie, and to this day, Leaf fans hate him with a passion because of that.
Packard worship less than that. Now, the other thing is this. I will say this too. At some point, I would like. Kevin Allen and I will often joke around about what book needs to be written for hockey. Like One Hit Wonders. We talked about that. Some guy just released a really cool book. I want to get him on the show about guys who won goal in the NHL.
Yeah,
but
Ken Reed, he just wrote a book.
Yeah, it's really good. But here's another one. Teams that made a choice like that, Mike, because the most famous one that I remember was the Quebec Nordiques giving the Flyers the option of Peter Forsberg or Rod Brind'Amour. Now, obviously, Brind'Amour is a great player too, but at the end of the day.
Well, Russ and I were at the 2016 draft in Buffalo, and the Sabres. All that draft leading up to that 8th overall pick, everybody was saying Sergachev.
Right, yeah.
And then they take Alex Nylander.
Yeah.
And that has been that.
Oh, yeah, there's a certain thing. I mean,
and heck, I believe the narrative with Brind'Amour was when Clarkey was dealing him was, well, he's never going to be a Selke winner.
Right. Yeah. Remember this?
And he was a Selke winner.
No, I mean, Brind'Amour was that. He's a great player, no questions asked. But Peter Forsberg
is also a guy that will rise to the occasion. If you tell him he couldn't do something, he would do it.
Oh yeah, but Peter Forsberg.
See, I think the more fascinating.
I know it's true.
I think the more fascinating book act would be like these guys who were drafted. Like, okay, we're looking at the 2005 draft. There are 3 players in this draft who never played an NHL game, and getting an explanation of why Marek Zagrapan, who was drafted 13th overall for the Sabres, never made it to the NHL.
Right, I'd love to find that.
I have no intel on him, so
yeah.
I agree with you. To look at the highest players ever, and something I'm going to do tomorrow during the draft, which will be kind of fun, is I've been putting together a list of the best players of all time picked in certain spots.
Sure, but I think it's important to also note that every team has like their top, 80 picks as their hot picks, right? And this is why when guys like Neil Smith say when he picked Kim Janssen, he literally was just giving him a name, and it wasn't like he wanted Kim Janssen right there, like he knew. No, he just took Kim Janssen because that was a name they had, and they were just like, Kim Janssen.
Well, I mean, some scouts have seen him clearly.
But it wasn't like a conscious decision. We've got to take this guy if he's on the board. Yeah. Neil Smith just wanted to get the draft over with.
Right.
And that does happen in the late rounds of the draft. Like a lot of times they don't spend as much time on those guys as they do on the others because they'll look and ask the guy from the area, hey, is this guy worth it to take here? And if you have a good enough answer, but they don't have all these guys on the board. That's my point.
100% right. I've been involved in I was embedded one time with the team just like for one draft discussion, and I wasn't allowed to talk about it at all. And it was really interesting. I just said, I was a friend of mine, and I said, can I come in and just hear what this table looks like and what you guys are going to talk about? And I was an intern. I was doing something else. I wasn't even writing this was before Hockey Buzz. And the interesting thing about that, at least this was a long time ago, but what I found out about those kind of players later in the rounds in that time, Russ, at least, and I think this is probably still true today, is a lot of the later round picks are just guys that some of the scouts fell in love with.
Right. Oh yeah. They give them, these guys go all year scouting certain guys. And a lot of times the GMs, if you've shouted loud enough and you believe in them enough, and sometimes, if it's an early pick, it could cost you your job. They will say, hey, this is, whatever his pick. Let's go with this.
I've talked to him 25 times. I've seen this guy play, and everyone's missing what and that it is always fascinating to me and you get that in later rounds. It's interesting when so people saying, I'm missing things in the earlier round guys are seen so often that those kind of things don't usually apply.
Yeah, but the Leafs have a long time Swedish scout named Tommy Bergman, former NHL. I think he was a defenseman with Detroit.
Yeah.
They've given him basically in the 7th round. They've given him they've allowed him to pick, or they've said, okay, let's go with Tommy's guy. And in the last decade, Carl Gunnarsson, NHLer. Andreas Janssen, NHLer.
Yeah.
Victor Louvre played it with the Marlies. Pierre Engvall is. They've been able to get NHL players out of 7th round picks.
Those late picks they're amazing when you get them. I mean, we were talking about Braden Point, 7th round pick. Like he's one of the top 10 players in the NHL right now. So I mean, look at this whole thing. It's just kind of insane, right?
Well, Braden Point really, that was a great pick, and that was a pick that not everybody was behind. But I want to mention some guys that are not mentioned along with the big crew of guys that people are learning their names because for whatever reason they're not. Because I have some guys ranked in my first round that some don't have. So like Jeremy Poirier, a defenseman for St. John. He's really one of the best offensive defensemen in this group, but he is a risk taker. He's not great on his defense, so you're going to need to work with this guy. But he's got speed. He's got moves. You saw you put up the video.
Yeah.
He's got moves. Now, he's not going to get all of them off in the NHL, but that is a guy where if I'm picking 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, I'm taking that guy because my hope is I'll take a little time, let him get stronger. We're going to work with him on being a little bit more sensible with his decisions. Yeah. But that's a guy with a lot of talent. Ty Smolanic, he was with the U.S. team. I mean, he broke a finger and he still played in the All-American Prospects game, but it affected the rest of his season. So his points weren't anything near the year before. He's got tremendous speed and he's a centerman and he's smart. And this is another guy that's going to end up going in the second round that a lot of, draft people have forgotten about.
I talked to somebody about the USA team, and they said that there's going to be some real gems out of the USA team because they basically, since there wasn't, like last year's USA team was so crazy good, they were scouted so often. This team hasn't been nearly that,
No, I think that's true. An interesting one, the most polarizing guy in this draft is Jean-Luc Foudy, Liam's brother. So the interesting thing about him, I got 2 live viewings of him, one after the other, which is a great way to do it if you can. It's not always the easiest thing to do, but because of the Top Prospects game, I was able to do it, right? And he's a tremendous skater like his brother. He's really good with the puck. The problem is, and you have to sort of identify this, he was trying to make things happen on his own because he saw that his players were in bad positions a lot of times when he had the puck. And a lot of times he's the guy carrying the puck and there's no one to pass it to. Or if he passed it, he didn't get it back. Yeah. A lot of those things did affect him. And that's where a team, if they look at him, right, and they say, hey, there's a real diamond in the rough here, but we got to work with him a little bit. He probably got a little frustrated last year, but he's got these other tools and he is a center.
Right.
That's a guy worth putting some time into.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's going to be great, guys. We got to go. But I think that honestly, so tomorrow, again, we won't be a 1:00 show unless something like goes absolutely nuts and we have to talk about it, like a trade or something like that, in which case we'll jump on for a little bit. We're going to be basically like resting our vocal cords from 6 to 9 o'clock tomorrow night. We will have everybody jumping in and out. It'll be a fun show. I guarantee you we're going to have the first time we've had a draft show where we have Russ Cohen on, which is, of course, amazing. You guys all know Russ for draft. And then we also have Kevin Allen on.
Can't wait.
We'll be doing this combination. It's going to be really, I think, the best show we've ever put together for a draft. So
just think of it this way, Ak. Kevin is usually in the risers. I'm usually in the risers on the draft floor. Russ is usually on the air doing, and it's all going to be on our show tomorrow.
Yeah, it's all going to be there. Also, Jan's going to be jumping in and out, and Jan's and you got to check out Jan's mock draft on HockeyBuzz. That's an amazing thing. Like Jan is part of it. Underrated prospect guy, becoming like a super prospect guy.
Jan went out on a limb with the first pick.
I think that. So you got a lot.
Down on a limb on the 22nd pick, depending on who you listen to. So
yeah, you got to check out that mock draft is worth looking at. There's a couple other people doing mock drafts too on HockeyBuzz, which are great. But Jan's he's consistent.
Oh, the good part was we had guys who were commenters and a couple of guys who covered teams picking it. So we got a kind of a cross section to make it. Including Mr. Jello, whose pick went over like a lead balloon at times.
I know the most hate, but people didn't friggin' read my description. I said if they traded down, I think this is what and Kyle Dubas said that they might trade down, keeping his options open. They trade down. The guy who I picked, who I think would be picked in the 20s, would be their pick. But nobody did that, and they just it was an opportunity to rip on me. So enjoy.
As long as he's telling us what he absolutely will or won't do, which is just shocking to me that he would do that.
Might skip to everybody.
Just don't say anything. I mean, don't say what you will or won't do. You know.
Yeah, and here's a Funky. No, Funky, no way.
We'll leave.
No, he said, "Will Russ the Chicken make an appearance?" I said, "No."
Hey, that's not fair. This is my show, Mike. You don't know. You don't know that. Anyway, no, Russ is like $500 just to get him to leave the coop. So it's too expensive. We can't afford Russ.
I heard Purdue has a bounty on it.
Without the buzz, it's just hockey.